The three generations of one family shot dead in the Tunisia terror attack. A teenager tells the inquest he went to Sousse with his brother, uncle and granddad. But he was the only one to survive the massacre. Also tonight, rail fares are set for a shake-up. Will they really get any cheaper? MPs prepare to press the Brexit button. And football fans gather to say their goodbyes to Graham Taylor.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. We start tonight with the harrowing words of a teenager who tried to save his grandfather during the terrorist attack in Sousse. 16-year-old Owen Richards had only been in Tunisia for 12 hours at the very start of a holiday with three generations of his family when an Islamic State-inspired gunman opened fire. An inquest heard how Owen desperately tried to help them escape and closed his eyes as they were finally cornered. Neil Connery heard his moving testimony.
Heading for a Tunisian holiday they'd never return from, three generations of one family were among the victims of the Sousse terror attack. Owen Richards, here on the left, had just finished his GCSEs and went there with his uncle Adrian, grandfather Patrick and brother Joel to celebrate. Owen survived, and today the inquests heard his moving account of what happened. As the gunman attacked the hotel, Owen, his brother, uncle and grandfather ran to the inside pool, but Owen's granddad kept falling over as the gunman followed them. I was hugging granddad on the floor, and then I could see out of my right-hand corner my brother dive to the floor, Owen Richards said. Then Joel screamed. I think he shouted no 3 times, like pleading him to stop. He lifted the gun up, and I closed my eyes. Then I heard a bunch of shots. Owen described seeing his wounded grandfather. Grandad just said, "He's got me." Owen Richards was injured but managed to survive, running to a nearby hotel. But his brother, uncle and grandfather were among the 38 people who lost their lives. The coroner said Owen Richards had shown extraordinary courage in trying to protect his grandfather. Owen's mother, Suzanne, paid tribute to the son, brother and father she lost at Sousse, saying, "We are broken. Every day is a colossal struggle." Neil Connery, ITV News, at the Tunisia inquests.
Britain's baffling and often bewildering system for buying train tickets is being overhauled to make it easier to find the cheapest fares. Trials are to begin on selected routes in May to give passengers better deals. Now, the industry itself told ITV News today that the system is outdated and reform is long overdue. Our consumer editor, Chris Choi, reports.
From any time to advance, from on-peak to off, what you pay can vary depending on what, when and even where you buy your rail ticket. On this train today, passengers doing the same journey but paying from £24 to £45 for it.
There was a super off-peak available as well, but I have no idea when to take which one.
If you could just go somewhere where there was one place that told you the best price, that would be ideal.
What we found on this service between Sheffield and London are examples of confusion and complexity, along with a widespread lack of confidence that people have actually got the right fare for them. Train fares are riddled with complexity. An advanced single from Derby to Exeter costs around £89, but 3 separate tickets for the same journey, splitting it in Birmingham, Cheltenham and Bristol, costs £51, saving almost £40, while a super off-peak ticket from Perth in Scotland to London King's Cross costs around £150, but buying a single ticket to Edinburgh, then a single to London, costs just over £76. That's a saving of £72 on the identical trip. And look at this lot. To save £80 between Oxford and Wigan return, this passenger bought 20 tickets.
The only hassle is if you turn up at a station and you haven't got much time, you've got to print a lot of tickets, so you better make sure that you've got plenty of time.
Isn't it a fact that the rail industry actually benefits from this complexity, because all too often passengers end up paying more than they could have done because it's all so baffling?
Actually, no, this really is something where we in the train industry are as keen for people to trust the system and know they're getting the right ticket as people are themselves.
In the train industry, passengers often get sick of delays, and so far there's been a 30-year wait for such an overhaul of the outdated ticket system. Chris Choi, ITV News.
Well, if you want to know how to get the cheapest ticket for your train journey, then go online to itv.com/news for 11 tips to help you save money. The former Chancellor, George Osborne, has warned MPs that failing to back the Brexit bill would put Parliament against the will of the people. His comments came during the last day of debating the bill that will allow exit negotiations to begin. The government is expected to win that vote shortly, but it's hurting Labour, with 2 more front bench resignations tonight. From Westminster, here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Shipp.
We are getting ever closer to the moment we file our EU divorce papers in Brussels, and within the next half hour, Theresa May will know if she can trigger what's formally called Article 50. Most MPs, whether they like it or not, are likely to sign the permission slip. With the exception of David Cameron, who's no longer an MP, no one campaigned harder than the then-Chancellor George Osborne to keep our ties with the European Union. He who told us we'd all be £4,300 worse off if we left. He who warned of a post-Brexit recession.
To vote against the majority verdict of the largest democratic exercise in British history, I think would risk putting Parliament against people. I think it would provoke a deep constitutional crisis in our country.
The Tories have no real issues tonight. Labour, however, does. If any member of Labour's front bench wants to vote against Article 50, they'll have to resign or face the sack. Tulip Siddiq was one of those who chose to resign.
I did not want to resign my front bench role, but when all your neighbours, your local business people, your local pharmacists, local health professionals, your political allies, and indeed your political opponents make the point to you that you have to take a stand on an issue, I feel this is the right course of action.
Labour-dominated Wales voted for Brexit, and in Rhondda today, Leave voters and Remain ones had a simple message for any Labour MP trying to stop the divorce with the EU.
And the politicians are rowing between themselves. They don't even know themselves what they're going to do they?
We haven't really got an MP that'll stand for us. And I don't agree with the fact that they go into Parliament, they say what they want to say, but they don't consider us.
So tonight, MPs who campaigned vigorously to remain in the EU are going to vote to leave it. And when they do, the UK will take another step closer to Brexit.
And Chris, as we said, more signs tonight of just how difficult this vote is for Labour MPs.
Yes, that's right, Mary. In the last few minutes, 2 more members of Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet have announced they are resigning because they intend to vote against Article 50 tonight. Rachel Maskell, who's an MP in York, and Dawn Butler, an MP in London, say they will vote because their constituents voted to stay in the EU. Now, the MPs are wrapping up their debate at the moment. They start voting tonight at about 7 o'clock. Within the hour, we should have a decision. Theresa May herself has now left Downing Street. She's heading over here to the House of Commons. I don't think she'll have any problems. And tomorrow she will launch her policy document, the so-called white paper, in which we will get the details of how she intends to negotiate our way out of the EU. So, Mary, this week we are taking a significant step towards Brexit.
OK, Chris Shipp in Westminster, thank you. A gang of puppy farmers who sold hundreds of sick dogs they raised in filthy, dark cages have avoided jail. A court heard the group, who advertised the pets as homebred, sold the puppies to members of the public who were not aware they were being kept in squalid conditions in Essex. And the supermarket tycoon, Sir Ken Morrison, has died at the age of 85. He took his father's small grocery chain and turned Morrison's into one of the UK's biggest retailers. Sir Ken passed away peacefully at his North Yorkshire home following a short illness. One of Britain's worst paedophiles is tonight facing life behind bars after admitting a string of serious sex assaults on boys. 70-year-old Mark Frost, a former teacher and scoutmaster, abused children in Britain, Europe and Thailand over 4 decades. And detectives here fear there could be many more victims, as Rebecca Barry now reports.
A former teacher who exploited his position of trust to abuse vulnerable children. For years, Mark Frost evaded the police. Now he's admitted a catalogue of abuse, both in Britain and abroad.
This case ranks as one of the most serious child sex abuse cases I have been involved in. There's harrowing evidence in the prosecution's case which reveals a scale of abuse against children over a period of years.
When he worked as a teacher in Worcestershire in the 90s, he abused 2 of his pupils, assaulting them in classrooms and during break times. He was known as Andrew Tracy then, and in 1992 admitted his first offence for possessing indecent images. It was the beginning of decades of sex crimes. By 2013, he'd gone to Thailand, where he preyed on boys from impoverished families, inviting them to swim in his pool and play computer games. When he was arrested here, he skipped bail, but was eventually tracked down in Spain and brought back to the UK for questioning.
I believe that is you on a boat in Thailand. Is that you?
No comment.
Who were you on that boat trip with?
No comment.
Were there any children on that boat trip?
No comment.
Were there any other adult males on that boat trip?
No comment.
Canadian officials had tipped off British detectives about Mark Frost in 2012, but they failed to act straight away, by which time he'd already left the UK.
The horrible truth, of course, is had the system worked better, had we been able to use the information we had lying on shelves in Operation Spade, there would be some children, in my opinion, who suffered abuse who simply wouldn't have.
Hello, calling the NSPCC helpline. Are you calling concerns about...
The NSPCC has set up a helpline for anyone who thinks they may have been abused by Mark Frost, or Andrew Tracy, as he was once known. For 20 years, he taught at schools in East London, Worcestershire and Hertfordshire, and he was also involved with the Scouts, so it's feared he may have assaulted many more children. Mark Frost faces life in jail when he's sentenced tomorrow. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News. Heated scenes in Brussels as Nigel Farage speaks up for Donald Trump. And hundreds of fans and footballing greats gather for the funeral of the former England boss, Graham Taylor. Those stories and more after the break. Join me then. Hello again, welcome back. President Trump said today he wanted his pick for a new Supreme Court judge to go through an elegant and dignified confirmation process, but it is likely to be the exact opposite. There's been a backlash against his choice. The staunch Conservative Neil Gorsuch, with Democrats threatening to block him. And as our Washington correspondent Robert Moore reports, it's reuniting Republicans after a divisive week.
This is Donald Trump, so of course the rollout had an apprentice-style quality to it.
Thank you. And I would like to ask Judge Gorsuch and his wonderful wife Louise to please step forward.
The nominee for the Supreme Court emerging from a side door to bask in the president's lavish praise for him.
The qualifications of Judge Gorsuch are beyond dispute. He is the man of our country and a man who our country really needs, and needs badly.
The selection of Gorsuch has delighted Republicans, who believe he'll be a reliable vote for conservative causes for decades to come. But the nominee was careful to show humility.
A judge who likes every outcome he reaches is very likely a bad judge, stretching for results he prefers rather than those the law demands.
For liberal America, it's another defeat. Protesters gathered outside the Supreme Court in dismay, promising to fight the nomination. This is also a miserable time to be a Democrat in Congress. The party is still stunned by its election defeat and by Trump's opening days in power. They're having to use the tactics of guerrilla warfare to try and stop Trump's cabinet appointments.
Mr. Franco.
No.
But Democrats are being consistently outvoted and outmaneuvered.
They're so biased and...
Well, back at the White House, Trump was today continuing his assault on the media.
So much of the media is opposition party, knowingly saying incorrect things.
And in the last hour, we're sitting alongside a man whose advocacy for gun rights is as divisive as any issue in this country.
Wayne LaPierre, National Rifle Association.
Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
Well, here, the Prime Minister faced questions for the first time in Parliament today about her meeting with Mr Trump. Mrs May was accused of being slow to condemn his controversial travel ban and of ignoring calls to stop his state visit to the UK. Our political correspondent Emily Morgan is in Westminster. Emily, how convincing was Mrs May?
Well, she was pretty convincing, and she mounted a defiant defence of her position on Donald Trump's travel ban. She repeated that she thought the policy was wrong. She also said that she wasn't told in Washington about the ban on refugees, though she did stop short of clarifying whether she knew about the travel restrictions. When asked by Jeremy Corbyn about the controversial state visit, she essentially argued that post-Brexit, the UK's special relationship with the United States is more important than ever and more important than the travel ban.
Just what more does the President Trump have to do before the Prime Minister will listen to the 1.8 million people who've already called for his state visit invitation to be withdrawn?
The Right Honourable Gentleman's foreign policy is to object to and insult the democratically elected head of state of our most important ally. He can lead a protest. I'm leading a country.
Mr Trump's planned visit was also discussed by Nigel Farage in the European Parliament today.
Yes, that's right. And in typical pantomime style, Nigel Farage launched a ferocious defence of Donald Trump. As he did so, a Labour MEP sitting behind him held up a sign reading, "He's lying to you." This is what prompted the MEP to make the protest.
What we need to do is to have an open dialogue with the newly elected, most powerful man in the world. And if you throw that rejection back in my face, then you prove yourself to be the anti-democratic zealots that I always thought you were.
Well, UKIP is pretty cross about this. They've made a formal complaint to the Parliament accusing them of not taking this seriously enough.
Thank you. Israeli forces are evicting residents of a Jewish settlement in the West Bank after a court ruled the homes were built on private Palestinian land. Thousands of soldiers and police have been sent to Amona to assist in the operation. More than 600,000 Jews live in the settlements, which are considered illegal under international law. And spectacular footage has emerged of hot lava flowing from an active volcano into the Pacific Ocean in Hawaii. The rare phenomenon is called a fire hose. And finally, the coffin of the former England and Watford manager Graham Taylor was greeted with applause today as it arrived for his funeral service. Footballing stars past and present and hundreds of fans turned out to say goodbye to the 72-year-old who died suddenly last month. Here's Paul Davis on the farewell to a footballing legend.
He was the man who invented the concept of the family football club. Today, Graham Taylor's extended Watford family turned out to say thank you and goodbye to a man who was so much more to them than a football manager.
Graham Taylor was one of the finest persons you could ever meet.
A legend, and that's all I can say, Mr. Watford.
Graham Taylor's widow, Rita, his daughters and family were joined by some of football's great and good, and by many of the players that Taylor led on a remarkable journey up through the divisions.
He's a people person, wasn't he? And it was about the people. The game and everything was all part of it, but the people was the important thing.
2,000 people stood outside St Mary's Church listening to a message from Elton John, who as Watford chairman recruited Taylor.
He was without doubt like a brother. He is a legend in this community, in football and in life. I love you, my friend. Thank you for everything.
England's John Barnes, whose career was launched by Graham Taylor, says he was unique.
he was like our father. He was like our father in terms of espousing to all of his players the importance of humility, the importance of the team, the importance of the relationship between the players and the fans and the community, and he heard about all the community work he did.
Taylor went on to manage Aston Villa, Wolves and of course England. But this was his community, the home he returned to, and the people who turned out today to applaud him and say thank you for the memories and the legacy you left behind. Paul Davis, ITV News, Watford.
Farewell to Graham Taylor, and that is all from us for now. Julie Etchingham's here with news at 10, but from me and all the team, have a great evening. Bye-bye.